Welcome to the Golf Coach Podcast, Steve. How you going, brother?
Waking up, brother. I'm doing good, actually. Thanks.
It is early again. People who listen, Steve, you're in Singapore, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I've got about 6 a.m. here.
This is the second time I've had you on the podcast. I'm delighted you said yes again. You know, lots of people listen to your podcast. I was telling you, you're always in the top 3 listened for each week, mate. How good's that, huh?
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Must be the knowledge that you keep dropping on this conversation.
Glad they're enjoying what I'm saying.
Hey, so you're still at Laguna, right?
Laguna, yeah, it's coming up to the second year, so it's been good.
Where'd you duck off to? I saw you ducked off yesterday somewhere on a ferry or something.
Ferry. So yeah, a bunch of my buddies, golf pros, they like to head over to a place called Batam, which is really close to Singapore, Indonesia border, I guess, and it's just a ferry ride. Yeah. It's like 40 minutes, so we did 36 holes in a day, and we were back by 8 o'clock. It was pretty crazy, actually.
36 in a day. That's a long day, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I spoke to you, but I hadn't played golf in 2 years because of my back, and so this was my, I think, 5th and 6th round.
Yes.
In 2 years, and my 5th and 6th round in about 2 months, because I only played back about 2 months ago. Yeah. So it was fun.
How'd you go?
It was okay. It's about how my game looks. Yeah. You know, 13 holes look like I can play golf, and 5 don't, and it adds up to a high 70s or low 80s score.
Yeah.
With potential. So it was good.
No, I understand what you mean by that as well, and it's I don't play a lot either myself, and I just did the same thing in Tasmania with Kerrod, and
all right.
We were supposed to have a day where we were supposed to play like 36 kind of, and it got half rained out, and I was okay with that. I was okay with
it. Right.
I actually come back with a sore toe because and I was Googling it, it was like an impact toe because of my toenail. I thought I had an ingrown toenail, but because I'd played so much golf, my trail foot, the big toe on it was getting impacted a lot, and hadn't done that for such a long period of time. You know, where I played, 6 rounds in 5 days or whatever. So it hadn't done that, or 5 rounds in 5 days. So, yeah, no, I know it's like getting back into the swing of things and lowering the expectations as well, which is difficult, right?
It's tough. Yeah, I mean, when you've played at any sort of level where, hopefully we've had our scoring around par or better consistently, we've played regularly, and you kind of can't get back there. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to like.
I tell you what surprised me, right, before we get into what the podcast is about, which I'm excited to kind of tell people about what this is today. And they would have seen it in the headline anyway. But when we went down that trip, right, we went all the way down, and our first course we played was on King Island called Ocean Dunes. And we're on the first tee. I was teeing off maybe second group. And I'm a bit worried, right? It has been a while since I've got brand new clubs. I've had them for a couple of days, taking the plastic off them on the first tee. And I pipe driver down the first. I thought, geez, that was good. Got that one quite well. And then I hit 3 wood to middle of the green. And I got a little cheeky, 30-footer for eagle, 2-putt birdie. And I thought, geez, how good is this? I'm on. Next hole, 4-iron, snap hooked at 120 metres. Lost ball.
There it is.
Taking a drop. 270 metre par 4. I've got a 5-footer for bogey. I'm like, here we go. Back to reality. I've just made a nice little birdie up the first, goosebump type of stuff, and brought straight back to reality. Hey, but Stevie, I've got you on today because I ran this past you a while ago around getting you on to kind of educate us a little bit on, I guess, ball flight laws and a few buzzwords that people have heard through YouTube or through in golf instruction. And I wanted to go into detail around what those terms were and potentially on how we can best practices to help shift some of these things that we measure, that we use as measurements to help better our game, essentially. Now, those types of topic areas that we're going to dive into is, the difference between swing direction and club path, which I think a lot of coaches would be excited about. We're going to talk about angle of attack. We're going to talk about what we also see around a general slice pattern and a hook pattern, and how we can shift these things through the easiest practice possible. Not through essentially kind of going into the crazy, what type of drills and what to expect, but how we need to shift these ball flights. Does that sound all right with you, mate?
Let's get into it. Yeah. Hopefully we can, get them a little bit clearer on some of the terms.
Yeah. No, I'm
and as you said, understanding them how to fix it a little bit.
Yeah, I think so
Simple
too.
ways.
I really do. So what do you use? What device do you use at your work, Stevie? Do you use a ball tracking device, club tracking device?
Yeah, I've used TrackMan probably for the last 5 to 6 years. Before that, I had Flight Scope.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like TrackMan. I think it's the iPhone of the devices. It's super simple.
Yeah.
And and you could make it as complex data wise or as simple as you need to just by changing the parameters.
Yeah.
What you want to look at or what you want the student to look at, whether that's one number or 20
and 20 numbers. And this is,
or
what about when you hear coaches? I hear old school coaches just when I was at an awards night talking about, oh, you need to learn to coach without, technology. You need to learn to do all this. We're obviously way too deep into it now, right? We're not guessing anymore with this technology. Is that what you like about it? We're not guessing, we're kind of measuring more.
Yeah, I would say we're definitely measuring, and it's really all about how you use the technology. So, I mean, there's always an argument, right, for both sides. Whether an old school coach says you've got to learn to coach without it. I think a lot of us coaches, we're using it for confirmation. We're using it for feedback. I think if it's used in the right way, it's a great feedback tool.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I'm just trying to get my player to work through a certain parameter or range. So, ultimately they're seeing that they're starting to do a very similar thing every time, whether that's a club head speed window, whether that's an swing direction window, because ultimately if they're trying to hit a certain shape, for the most part, they need to be within a certain window to be able to, let's say, be more predictable with that shape. So there's no point them having a swing direction that's negative, let's say 3, and then all of a sudden being -7 and expect to see a similar shot shape, because it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Which we will absolutely see with our, let's say, avid golfers all the time. So, it just gives them feedback. Obviously, the ball can do it as well, but it can be a little bit tricky because we don't always know whether it was more face related or swing direction related or
contact,
something like that. So, yeah.
And and what I like about it too is that you can really measure. You can measure someone's, I guess, growth or, how they're moving through it, because a lot of the time when we're making a shift in our golf swing, we lose contact, right? We lose timing.
Sure.
So when we add a new thing or when we're starting to think about technique, timing and speed are the first two things, in my opinion, that kind of generally will jump out. Will lessen off. So a lot of the time people can go, hang on, I'm hitting it shitter, it's not working, and then they revert back and go, hang on, actually you are on the right track because we've got these measurement points here that are telling us we are moving in the right way.
Sure.
And it kind of gives that,
Definitely.
like you say, I think you use the word confirmation or, I guess affirmation or whatever it kind of is to help them there. Now, what is a TrackMan? What, you mentioned before the podcast about the definition, like what does it do?
What does a TrackMan do?
Yeah, what does it do as a whole?
Well, it's a Doppler radar system, and I guess the new TrackMans are dual radar system.
Yeah.
So they have a and it's basically measuring, I think it's around 30 plus parameters to do with ball flight.
Yeah.
So anything to do
club
with
and the ball, right? The club and the ball.
Yeah, I mean, essentially it's what's the face doing at the point of maximum compression, like where's it pointing, where's the strike, and obviously where's the direction of the strike, both vertically, I guess outwardly, and lots of other data points around that to do with like spin, etc. So it gives us club head speed, etc., etc.
Yeah, and so that's the big orange thing that we see at the back of a lot of driving ranges on TV or on Instagrams and things like that. And I actually
expensive orange thing,
big expensive orange thing. I got the GC cord myself, but I think the TrackMan is definitely the one that, like you said, is the iPhone, right? But it's also got a lot of material out there for people to learn about and kind of get their head around, and it simplifies it a lot too. It gives people parameters and windows as well. I actually sat on a what do you call it, a stage or whatever it was when I was presenting next to
Yep.
Brooke Salmon from TrackMan and talking about the history of
Awesome.
TrackMan. And it was, pretty much started, and this is me very much paraphrasing, but around like Navy ship, I believe. And
Right.
they were reading it, and then someone, I think the general question was, the guy who invented it said to someone, "Oh, I'd love that to track my golf club or golf ball," or something along these lines. And the guy said, "Well, I can."
Okay.
And I think that's where it kind of eventuated from. It's very brand. I should have Googled it, but that's kind of the story that I heard where it started from. So,
Well, I was in,
yeah,
sorry to chop you off. I was in Denmark, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago, and we were down at the TrackMan, the TrackMan headquarters there. And I mean, it's amazing, firstly, to see how many TrackMans there are there. But we went into one of the rooms, and there was this big, like really big, I think it was grey box where I don't know if even that was the first one, where it looked like you couldn't even like pick it up, and there was like there was this like evolution of all the TrackMans, which I took a photo of. I think there were 5 at the time, including like the new 4 there. So it was kind of interesting to see that evolution of how big it was. And I certainly remember around late 90s, I think, when I was finishing off my traineeship, when I first was on a TrackMan.
Yeah.
And until now, how that's kind of changed.
Yeah, the data
evolved.
comes out quicker too now, right? And easy to read. And it's like phones. You've got to look at the way that we used to kind of phones or computers, the first computer,
Absolutely. That's impressive.
So tell me now about when we hear the term ball flight laws. What does that mean when we hear that term?
Ball flight laws. I guess that is, how the ball curves.
Yes.
And what are the main influences of that curve?
Yeah.
And then we have understanding different ball flights.
Yeah.
And then how the path and the face, I guess, influence those 9 different ball flights that we learn as a trainee.
Yeah. Because I think when, during our golf lessons or when I'm coaching as well, when someone says to me, this happened when I hit that shot, and I go, no, it didn't. I might say, I have to explain to them, this is how the ball actually curves. This is what actually happens.
Right.
And this is, it's not subjective. It's actually the law. It's what actually happens to create that ball to move in that fashion.
Correct.
And I think once you've got a bit of a guideline of that, right, you can start to work backwards and start to understand on how to shift that ball flight, right? Because you've got an understanding of what shifts it. Now, to kind of dive into like the first subject area, we hear a lot, and it took me a while to get my head around this too in my early coaching career, the difference between swing direction and club path. Now, it can be quite confusing. And how do you look at it? How do you explain it?
And it took me a while as well.
Yeah, it took me a while.
So I guess for the coaches out there, even a basic understanding of the D plane is good to kind of get into and research, which I won't kind of dive into it today, but there's definitely lots and lots of good info on there. And I forgot the guy. There's a guy in the US that's got lots and lots of really good YouTube stuff where he uses like those really big like golf clubs. You've seen like those really big golf clubs that demonstrate with the what is it, little thing that comes out of the face, projector that comes out of the face, and it kind of, so I think that's really good stuff for those that want to dive into it a little bit more so.
Yep.
But I think, when I teach now, I rarely have path, because with TrackMan, you can, as I said, you can set like different parameters on there. So I can if I wanted to, I could just have club head speed. Usually I work with about 6 or 7 parameters, unless it's something really specific with the student. But I rarely have, to get back to your question, I rarely have club path on there, because it's kind of confusing, because club path is a combination of other parameters.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets really hard to explain to the student that. So I mostly have angle of attack and swing direction. Those two together really form the club path.
Yeah.
And how I would explain that in my head anyway is, when we're talking about angle of attack, my chopstick, we basically have the down, downward or upward or flat spot.
Yes.
So the more down the angle of attack, is this a good view for you?
Yes, I'm looking down. So the more down we hit it.
So the more down we hit it, so I'm hitting kind of down this way. Yes. And I'll always ask the student that asks me the question, because I like to softly educate without sort of, trying to like blow their minds out. But I'll always say, when you hit down on the ball, without like any other influence, because there are other influences, does that cause the club to swing more out, or does that, cause the path to go more out or more across, or just say more right or more left for the righty? And I always just like wait for the answer. And it's definitely a mix. Like, no one gets it correct all the time. And the good thing is it's a 50-50, right? So you have a 50% chance of getting it, but it makes the club go more out. So the more down you hit on the ball, the more out we swing. So essentially, if I hit -3 down, all things being equal, the path is going to be out 3.
Yep.
It's pretty simple. And there's a vertical swing plane that has an influence on that, but it's negligible. So at this stage, we won't add it in there. So, often, so with regards to the swing direction, if I'm swinging straight into the golf ball, so my swing direction is straight, because I didn't actually say that, and I hit down 3, I hit out 3. And out 3 is the club path.
Yeah. So the club path is what the club head is doing at the point of impact.
Yep.
And the swing direction is
the true direction that the club's swinging in, not influenced by anything else.
Yeah.
So basically, my swing direction, if my swing direction is going, does that look left to you?
Yes.
And I'm hitting, so let's say if my swing direction is 3 left.
Yes.
And my angle of attack is like 3 down.
Yes.
That actually causes the club path to be essentially straight.
Pretty straight.
Or zeroed out.
Yeah. So, and why do you not, so you talk about, you use the term swing direction a lot in your coaching and angle of attack instead of using the term club path, because club path is there's a few factors in place in regards to, like, I guess, ball position as well, and angle of attack, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say so much with ball position. I just would say you're combining like multiple swings to get that club path.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be hard for the student to understand that when you hit down, you hit out, and when you hit up, the club path moves in.
Yeah.
And so, but I think it's very important as it relates to like driver, because most of our students we're trying to get them to hit up slightly on the driver. And so that definitely means that the swing direction is going to be very, very different for an iron.
Yeah.
If they're trying to hit a similar ball flight, that it would be for a driver, like completely different to achieve the same ball flight. Yeah. And for a lot of them, again, that can be, quite challenging to understand.
It can be. And for me, the way that I like to use the, swing direction, I guess, versus club path topic that I'll use, I generally will use a hula hoop at times as well, to kind of try and help explain it. But one that got explained to me that really started to land with me one day was the Ferris wheel. Like I've mentioned to you before, is the Ferris wheel tilted on, let's just say, like a 45-degree angle. Yep. And there's carriages going around on that Ferris wheel. Now, that Ferris wheel is the swing direction. You got me? Like, so it's not moving. Yep. It's that kind of swing direction. Right? Like you say, because that to you is an easier one for the student to measure. Well, to understand, because it's where they're swinging the club, right?
Absolutely.
Not the point of impact. Yeah. So I like that one. I really do, because I might start looking at my parameters too in my coaching. It raised a good point. So that is the swing direction. Now, if we think about the bottom of that Ferris wheel and where we move that ball. So if we move that ball more to the back of the Ferris wheel, you're telling me, right, that angle of attack is going to be down more because it's back, right? So it's going to push the club path to the right.
Yes.
But if I then from there, if I got that, let's just say all things being equal as well, so that ball position is too far back, whatever. Well, just say it's too far back on the Ferris wheel. It's going to push the path to the right because I'm collecting the ball slightly early. And then if I put the Ferris wheel and I push that, say the carriages are going around and it's starting to go up a little bit up the Ferris wheel now. So my angle of attack is increasing. Well, yeah, it's increasing. I get that.
Essentially.
One. That one blows my mind.
Yeah.
Increasing, decreasing. Then all of a sudden my club path is going more left because it's going along with the Ferris wheel.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I would definitely say moving the ball back on the arc is going to push things more to the right.
Yes.
I wouldn't always say that's going to be, well, it depends on what club they're using, but absolutely swing's going to go more to the right. Club path's going to potentially go more to the right if they're hitting down the ball more.
Yeah.
But then we also have, how the student moves and reacts to that particular ball flight.
Okay. Yeah.
Meaning, like I've seen lots of really cool demonstrations where someone's moved the ball back and has hit the ball higher because they've had to add a lot more tilt this way in order to catch the ball. Just like, I guess when our slicers sometimes would have the ball like way left on the arc. So let's say that would be, just towards maybe their left foot again for the right-handed players. The way that they would access that golf ball is to actually have to get very, very forward on it.
Yeah.
So we can often see forward ball positions where the swing's going way, way left and quite a lot down.
Yeah. Yep.
And sometimes we don't even see a really hard. So for example, if someone swings, this is not so common, but maybe like 7 degrees to the left. So swing direction is going 7 degrees to the left because the ball's way forward, and they can kind of really get a lot on top of the ball, which can influence the downward nature of the angle of attack.
Yep.
Maybe it's 6. The club path is not going to be very much left or right. It might be just like a little bit left.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we see big, hard divots going deep left, and we just see like really small cuts.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. I'm not going to say any more on it, but you're talking about how a lot of people might understand this, that where you can place your ball position actually subconsciously can influence how you move your body throughout the golf swing or your release patterns, right? Because you're reacting to that
100%.
ball. So we trick students all the time with ball position, but what Stevie's saying there, right, is that a lot of the times, I guess the upper hub, I'll say, from the belt line upwards, you got the ball back, you can rock back to try and save it, and then all through the ball further forward, we might see something like people are familiar with an Alex Noren, who starts to kind of attack it with the upper hub getting out there, and it still comes out quite nice. So
maybe not the best way to hit a driver, but
not at all. Not at all.
At the end of the day, I think our students are always reacting to the curve of the golf ball. And I guess in their minds, what's the best way to make the ball finish towards a target?
Yeah.
So
tell me though, so would you be safe to say that the divot on the ground, let's say the divot, does that determine more swing direction or club path?
Swing direction.
Swing direction for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Because again, the club path, it's, you can't use the divot for that because it's combined by like multiple things. And I think it's hard to define an angle of attack by a divot because we don't always hit off, grass and anyway, it just is.
No,
and turf conditions can change dramatically.
I agree. So I think people, when people say to me, they might even get it mixed up. Like you got to understand the difference between swing direction and club path. And I think there's two important things that not so much for the recreational golfer needs to understand, but I guess for the terminology, they should probably start thinking more swing direction instead of club path because there's too many influences for them to. Only we can measure club path, I guess, through machines and ball flight. But so tell me, what's the best? Let's talk about swing direction, right?
Yep.
What's the best practices for someone to, let's say someone has a swing direction that's going too far negative, as we say, like across the ball to the left. So we see a divot on the ground going left a lot of the time. And for majority of the time, that's gonna create a left to right ball flight for the right-handed golfer. Would you agree? Now,
Yeah.
what's the best practices to kind of shift a swing direction from that?
So I'll look at probably two factors, like super simple factors.
Yep.
It's just going to be ball position. So moving the ball back further on the arc. So again, for the right-hander, that's moving the ball back towards the right foot, let's say towards the center of the stance.
Yep.
Which ultimately moves the handle forward as well, all things being equal. And a really simple one is just their alignments. I mean, I can't say how many lessons I've had where I actually like some of the numbers, with regards to the downward strike of the golf ball. Let's say the student might be hitting down 3, which is like a very functional angle of attack for a 7-iron. And maybe like the swing direction is -6, for example, and they're just hitting like they've just got way too much curve. And generally I like a lot of what they're doing and shifting their aim bias, which might be like too much to the left, and even just moving that back. Essentially all that does is the angle of attack won't change in theory when you shift their aim, if the same target's still in mind, but the swing direction is going to ultimately change. Because all you're doing is you're moving. If someone is aiming, let's say 10 degrees left, and they've got a -5 swing direction, and I move them 5 degrees left and they make the same swing, well, the swing direction is only going to be, let's say, half of that, for example.
Yeah.
So that's a really simple way to change it. And, I do teach indoors, outdoors a lot, and I think it's important for the student to have an understanding of their target, when they're hitting golf balls, because ultimately if you give them a really good lesson and they go and basically aim at the same, I think that lesson is kind of like null and void a little bit, because they're going to be reacting to that target again, or where they're aiming again. And so that's those two simple ways is how I would change it. Ball position would move back on the arc. Alignments would be more right than left.
Yeah. So
in the whole body alignments, especially the upper.
How true is it when you see, so if you've got a swing direction to the left, there's a good chance, like what Stevie's saying, is your aiming could be, aiming a little bit too far left as well, right? That's what you're saying.
100%.
And then what happens is, guys, when you're listening, is that why aiming is so important is that if you're aiming left, it is so difficult to get your swing direction to go right. Like, it is so difficult. So if you're slicing the ball and you're aiming left, no matter what drill or funky thing you've seen on Instagram, if your alignments are left, you got to do something really crazy with ball position and your tilts to try and get it accordingly. Don't you? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about talking about aiming? It's something that I've been thinking about, and I've also been thinking about from our last podcast about how you talked about you off the top of your head, you said that if you've been doing something for a period of time, it takes 20% of the time to
change
cure it or change it.
Yeah. I said something like that.
And what kind of why that's been playing in my head a lot with my teaching is, let's say, for instance, what we're talking about now, right, is a swing direction going too far to the left. And if we simply do a right foot back drill, right? So the right-handed golfer, if we put the right foot back, that allows that student to swing a little bit deeper on the way back, and the club is less likely to kick out too far on the way down. Well, I'll do that right foot back drill for the student, and they just crush it, right? They absolutely just flush it. And then I think to myself, maybe after 10 or 15 balls, I say, let's try it with a normal stance. And I go, well, hang on. Why don't I just have that student play with the right foot back and gradually creep it in over an extended period of time? What do you think about that? Like, about that with alignments? Is that a strategy?
Absolutely. I think whatever the student can manage on the golf course and visually doesn't, let's say, mess them up in terms of like how they see things, can absolutely work. I think you're talking a little bit there about, what I find with some students, they're very open to doing that. And if they stick to it, most likely they're going to have like really, really like functional outcomes. And then other students are going to do that the first time, maybe not quite make the right pass at the golf ball. Ball goes 45 degrees right, and they're back to aiming way left again. So I think that's kind of like the challenge, a little bit of playing versus, hitting balls in the range. But I would absolutely do that in my coaching all the time as well. It's just, I think when you're talking about getting students on the golf course, sometimes extremes can be challenging to do.
Yeah.
Even though ultimately it's probably the fastest way to shift their pattern.
Yeah.
It's just that, can they stick with that process, on the golf course enough times to see the shot, and then all of a sudden, I think that they're going to have that confidence once they do see it or see that shot, that new shot.
Yeah, no, and that's something I've been incorporating into my big training, because do you think there is not a blanket alignment? Would you agree? I guess
Correct.
For every single person, you go watch, I kid you not, I watched Adam Scott hit balls at the Australian PGA for half an hour, just sat behind him as close as I could because I had the caddy pass on, so I went and sat right next to him.
Nice.
And I promise you, he pulled every club.
Right.
Every club. It was actually quite interesting. As the longer the club got, the less of a pull it was. But it was all, every ball was finishing 20 yards left of his feet alignment.
There you go.
He was just warming up, but
Yeah.
it kind of was starting to drum into my head a little bit about alignment. What I've been, it's just, we have these things that play through our head for months when you're coaching. And I've been starting to think a little bit more about that right foot back, potentially for the person who's got a swing direction too far to the left. What's going on there, right, is that the whole organisation of their club and arms are generally getting out in front of their body too early, at some point in time, or out in front across the ball. So you think the best way to shift that swing direction is by, or both swing directions, is alignment and ball position?
Absolutely. Yeah, without doing anything outside of P1, the setup position.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
I'd also say, this may be a little bit, this is just something I look at with better players, and I think it's, can be important information as well. So you were just at the tour event, when you're watching the majority of these pros hit the ball, and let's just say they're hitting a 7-iron, sort of mid-iron, do you see much curve in their ball flight, or would you say that the ball tends to be falling in a direction, as it's peaking? What's your take on that?
That's interesting.
Compared to, let's say, obviously a lot of the students we deal with have a very swing nature to the ball flight. How would you describe
That's a very interesting point you make, because you've really got me thinking, because I was watching a lot of balls. They definitely didn't start. They all started down the line and fell away. I thought.
I remember watching, sorry to chop you off. I remember watching Robert Allenby, and when I was heading to the range, as a trainee and a young pro, or even maybe a good amateur back then. And one of the star players back then was Robert Allenby. And I remember seeing his ball flight, and it would, would start out really, really straight. And I'll be almost looking at it going, it's not even it's not moving. And then as it kind of peaked and it fell, it would just drop left.
Yeah, he does. I've seen him. Yeah.
Or someone else would maybe drop right.
Yeah.
Greg Norman used to hit a little bit of a fade. He's would fall to the right. And so, sometimes we use a word like drop draws and drop fades, because the ball flight is so straight all the way. And I think when a lot of, let's say, slightly more untrained eyes look at those ball flights, they just say, oh, they're really, really straight. And I think there's stuff that I look at on a TrackMan, for my better players at least, when they've got too much swing in their ball flight, or even, better players, maybe better juniors who are trying to tighten things up a little bit. And not saying I'm trying to get everyone to hit it really straight and aim really straight, but certainly for their stock swings, what are we looking for versus how to shot shape can be a very different conversation. So I was curious about that.
You're so right, because they were just falling like a butterfly. He didn't have, there was no loss of, obviously it was in complete control. There was no loss of it wasn't slinging out to the side and coming back. It was taking off. It was taking off slightly left of his feet alignment, definitely, and falling left. But then as the club got longer, it got straighter. But I'm not too sure as well if he was pretty warmed up. Like he was giving it a good nudge. I'm not too sure. I know that when I swing it slower when I'm warming up, I definitely have the ball falling left, or hooking, I should say, in my case. So that's an interesting question that you raised there. That's just about, for these elite players, having the understanding of how their ball falls out of the sky, like is really important, especially when getting to some of these flags that they're kind of hitting to, right? And understanding which ones they can't hit to. Can you explain to me, why Allenby's ball was doing that? And
yes, I certainly couldn't at the time, but I think I can do a better job of it now.
Tell me.
So when a player's hitting a drop draw, and often we look down at the divots, there might be a little divot there, and we might even see on softer ground the divot's going a little bit left, just a little bit. The reason why that's happening is they've got, let's say, a swing direction that's going -3. Yeah. And this would be typically how it would teach a really elite player to hit a drop draw that likes to see the ball fall left. When you've got a swinging draw with an iron, it usually means the swing direction's going too straight or to the right. So we'll call that 2 to the right. So the player's swinging 2 degrees to the right. They might be hitting down on the golf ball, which might be -4. All of a sudden, the path is like +6.
Yes.
And obviously, with that much club path, there has to be a closing face to that club path, and that's where you get a lot of swing. Now, it feels great to that player because the ball goes goes further than certainly what it was if they weren't doing that. But sometimes it can be challenging to control.
Manage.
We'll say. Yeah. So the way that the elite player is doing it, they might be hitting down. They might be hitting -3 swing direction, so swinging left 3. That's why we see maybe the divot going a little bit left, but they're hitting down -5. So again, understanding that the more down you hit, the more out we swing on the golf ball.
Yes.
From a club path standpoint,
yes.
Now the path is like +2.
Yes.
And they know how to manage the face. They know how to like square the face off to that. So that's why you can actually have someone swing left and still draw the golf ball, or either hit like a really, really straight
I swing left.
drop draw.
I swing left.
So that's about what how I would define it. And again, there is a vertical swing plane that's added to that, but let's assume that the vertical swing plane is managed. It's not like too extreme, and the club path is, consistently in that direction. So that's more or less how, when I spoke before about parameters for my better players, I think if they can constantly, and one of my elite players that just gone on the Japanese tour in Japan, I've watched him, he likes to hit a fade. I've watched him hit, 7 irons, let's say 20, 30, 40, 50 balls in a row where his swing direction, and good players can hit down the ball the same amount, so you almost don't have to talk about that with them. But I've watched him hit or have his swing direction go like -6, between -4.5 to -6 within that window, we'll call it 1.5, and not shift it, for 30, 40 golf balls. And when you can do that, it's very easy to understand what the club face needs to do, because the club's basically moving in the same downward and leftward direction every single time. And they then, their feel for what they're doing with the face is so much better than if that was shifting around all the time.
Yeah.
And obviously they can hit the middle of the face, so there's no gear effect going on as well. So that's just what I see with better players. They're so refined.
Yeah.
And it's why, they can create a very, very similar shot shape every time.
Yeah.
If that's what they're trying to do. They're not trying to put big curves on the golf balls for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. So let's move on to the next subject area. We've been touching on it, but I want to go into detail about it. Angle of attack.
Yeah.
We should start it. But tell me, angle of attack, what does it mean?
So it's how much the club is moving down or up.
Yep.
Defined by TrackMan at the maximum point of compression.
Yep.
And as a general rule, let's say with I just say with any ball that's on the ground, except maybe a 3-wood, but let's say with any ball that's on the ground, we want to have a slight downward strike.
Yep.
Otherwise, we would probably hit behind the ball or whatever. And for a slower swing speed, that tends to be a lower number. So let's say for our club golfers and certainly club male golfers and lady golfers and juniors, we're probably looking at like -1 to -2 is more than enough. And certainly for the stronger male, maybe they're creating 85 miles an hour of club head speed for an iron and above, it's probably going to be -2 to -5 or more.
Yeah. I like 4.
Otherwise, it's going to hit the ball way too high.
4's always a number that kind of just sits around my head, within give or take from there. I know you use the word parameter, but I'll if you're around there, you're okay. All right. So tell me now, let's just stick to the irons. You mentioned there about the reason to why, well, you didn't say the reason. I'm going to ask you why. A strong male with more club head speed, why is he preferred to have a better, let's say, increased angle of attack? Why is that compared to a slower swing speed?
Yeah, generally it's got to do a lot with the loft that they're going to apply to the golf ball, the spin loft.
Yeah.
So, with a lesser angle of attack, the ball's going to fly higher, which is, again, great for like juniors and ladies and slower club head speeds, which we need.
Yeah.
And, again, all things being equal, as the angle of attack moves more down, if the right loft's applied to the golf club, we would need to take loft off it to flight it lower. Yeah. So we're certainly not advisable, for a lady golfer to perhaps have a -4 angle of attack with if she applies the right loft to the golf club, because she's just not going to get the ball very high in the air.
It's not going to spin up, right? Because backspin helps us with loft, yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so once they get to a certain club, it's just not going to flight in the air. So often we might hear that, once they get to like a 7-iron, 6-iron, or even like an 8-iron, they're all kind of flying the same distance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's because, they're not applying the right loft to the golf club, which obviously affects the spin.
Yeah.
And, for a male golfer, you just can hit the ball way, way too high. So it's going to be really challenging for them, perhaps in like wind conditions and things like that. If their angle of attack is not down enough and they've got lots and lots of speed.
Because what helps us, so what you're saying is then if the male hasn't got enough loft, I don't want to keep saying male, the high club head speed guy, right? Person has got more loft. It's going to just shoot up in the air. It's going to jump up in the air, as you could kind of say. Like it doesn't spin up in there. It just kind of balloons up in there. Tell me, what is the loft of a 7-iron, roughly?
Loft of a 7-iron. I think 35.5 is standard.
Yes.
But standards change.
That's okay.
Have changed a lot. I mean, my 7-iron, because it's a T200, I think it's 32.5 or 33.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 33 is guess. So that's around 2.5 stronger than what I'm used to playing. And, it's interesting. I was having a chat with one of my students yesterday, and my 7-iron T200 flies 180 meters. And I was, when I was 25-year-old trainee and probably like in pretty good condition, I hope, I'm sure my 7-iron was 145.
Yeah.
And my 6-iron was 160. That's just what I remember. And I've got 200 yesterday. It's like, give me the 6-iron.
I know, mate.
And it's crazy.
It's fucked.
And he said, why do you think that happened? And I think, well, there's definitely less loft on the golf club.
Yeah.
Weirdly, I'm a little stronger.
Yeah.
But not much. I think my club head speed with my 7-iron is like 91, maybe around 90. But the golf ball is just flying like a really crazy distance. And I use a Pro V1 because I don't want so much spin on my ball because I spin it too much anyway. So I feel like it's, I'm going to say 20% the golf club, maybe 10% me, and 70% the ball. I know that's a bit off topic, but I think the ball is really flying a lot longer now.
That's good.
But yeah, if I did,
I'm going through the same.
You see the same. It's weird. Yeah.
Like
it's fun.
I got fitted just recently for my new clubs, and I just had a look as it's going on YouTube and all that stuff. We got it all filmed, and I
Right.
turned around. And I was like, "How far?" Like I was hitting at
Right.
7 iron up near that distance too, like high 170s, and it was. I didn't end up going with it.
Right.
I was going, "You're kidding me?" That was like a 4 iron back in the day. I'm like, "Give me a
100%.
4. I'm covering it. I'm smashing it." Yeah,
Right.
it's really bananas, and I do feel like I potentially maybe am a little faster than I was, but
Right.
not that much. Not that much, but yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
bananas. But anyways, the reason why I asked you that question was, so 7 irons at 35, right? Let's call it 35.
Sure.
So if you're hitting down on at 4 and you're talking about the difference there, you spoke about spin loft. Do you use spin
Yeah.
loft or what loft parameter are you looking at the ball?
Um, yeah, I do use spin loft. I use, I guess spin loft with launch.
Launch. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not really good at remembering all the numbers, so I do use the optimizer feature on TrackMan a lot,
Yeah. Okay.
relative to like what the student's ball flight is looking for. So one of the cool things with TrackMan, you can set it on like mid trajectory, and you can have like angle of attack parameter, launch, spin loft, spin, and you can see really fast if the spin loft is too high.
Yes.
Um, and launch and spin loft often go together, meaning if the student's adding too much loft at the bottom,
Yeah.
spin loft's going to be too high, and the launch generally goes a little bit too high, and the spin rate will also go high. So you see all these parameters kind of go up. And in fact, I was having a lesson with one of my tour players recently. He's from Japan. Spin loft's just way too high, and he really struggles in the wind. And all these like parameters on let's say the loft numbers, so spin loft, launch, spin were all like really high.
Yeah.
And his angle of attack actually was a little bit low, which again can often go together. And so we worked on some things around his impact, around trying to get this upper hub to cover the ball a little bit more, trying to create a little bit more shaft lean, because he tends to, has a pattern where he's pulling up and back really early.
Yeah.
Left arm, stays back on his chest, and he just can't really get enough shaft lean. And I sometimes would use a term called over-optimize. So, from a practice standpoint, looking at TrackMan, and this is where feedback can be good. I'm just trying to get all the numbers that were too high on the spectrum to get like under the spectrum. And again, the cool thing with TrackMan, it has these like blue bars, which are in a sort of optimal range. And I said, we're going to try and, make a whole bunch of swings where we get over-optimized. And if that means that he has to swing it at a slower speed to feel something, and I build it back up, that's fine. So that's something that I do look for that type of player. Now, again, if he's playing in conditions, if I switch that to a high ball flight and it's out of the parameters, to me, that's a bit of a red flag. But you can be a slightly high ball hitter and still, be very functional, and you can be a slightly low ball hitter and still be, very functional. So I'm not trying to get everyone to look the same from a ball flight standpoint, but trying to make it functional so they can play, at a competitive level if that's where they're at. Hopefully
I think it's
that makes sense.
important for them to also be comfortable with that ball flight. So,
Totally.
Because, there's always that, well, not a joke, but you hear that conversation around how tour players get to tour and they think all of a sudden they have to try and fade it, when they've been drawing it the whole college life. And it's like, well, all of a sudden, you spoke about alignments. And if that ball flight and doesn't suit their eye and all this type of stuff, then they've got to change everything. They feel uncomfortable because it's a whole new different thing kind of happening. And I think, like you said, don't want everyone to be in the same, but we understand what is going to help them play better golf, right? So tell me about angle of attack. So we've got there that more club head speed, you're going to see an increased angle of attack with the iron, and slower club head speed, we're going to see a decreased angle of attack with the iron.
Yeah.
Now, talk to me. Let's go into the wood side of it. So hitting, let's say driver. Let's just say driver. Now, there's a big chase out there for people who wanting to hit the ball on the up a lot. You hear that a lot. Now, from my experience as a coach before I kind of hand it over to you, is that I see a lot of negative things happening in people's golf swings. People's golf swings trying to achieve an up, not so much reliant on change of setup to try and help increase the angle of attack to go up more. What is ideal with driver? What is it? Tell me. And what do you reckon?
Pretty subjective, but I would say it depends on speed again.
Yes.
If we're looking at a lesser speed golfer, certainly a more upward angle of attack. I was thinking like the water hose and how much pressure's coming out of the water hose. I mean, certainly if I don't have much pressure coming out of that water hose and my angle of attack is too shallow, or even maybe like it's down a little bit, it's going to just kind of drop out of the sky really early. So I want to tilt that up enough. So ideally I can maximize that. So let's say for lower club head speeds, and this is not sort of always the case, but I would say 3 to 5.
Wow, nice.
Can be really good to kind of get a lot more like height and loft on the golf ball.
And what's a lower club head speed?
I would say something 85 to probably just under 100.
And that would be,
let's say 90 to 100.
That would be a 240-yard golfer, roughly, or 240 yard.
Maybe something like that. Maybe a little bit less.
220-yard driver. Yeah. So you're saying for them potentially what's optimal, as a blanket. Obviously, we're putting people in a bunch. You say 3 to 5 up.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
And what about as you move into higher club head speed, guys?
Higher club head speed, I mean, it's interesting. Rory's like 5 up and 7 out.
Yeah.
So there's probably the greatest current driver of the golf ball.
Yes.
Why does he manage that? I think that's just how he moves best.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the end of the day. So, who am I to tell Rory to not hit 5 up on the golf ball when he's one of the greatest drivers out there at the moment, and he can flight it low enough when he wants to.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be, even in my head when I'm telling you that, I'm contradicting myself. I'm arguing with myself about that answer, because I just think there's always going to be what this player does, what that player does.
Yeah.
100%. I think I might get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure when I was in Abu Dhabi a few years ago, DJ's smoking it, absolutely smoking it, and he's 2 or 3 down on his driver.
Yeah, that's true.
Hitting a fade. We know Rory likes to hit up and out. So the reason why Rory can hit a really tight draw, and we go back to kind of like swing direction, Rory's hitting up 7, let's say, but he's hitting out 5. He's not hitting down anymore on the golf ball. So we know when you hit out, you swing left. Yeah. So there's still a draw pattern that's 2, which is a tight draw pattern, like hitting swinging left 3, down 5. It's actually the same path, negative, positive 2. So DJ's doing that, hitting a blister fade that's going forever, and they're playing in the same group and they're side by side.
Yeah, I would probably say Rory's got him off the tee though.
Rory's got him off the tee. He does. You're right. He does have him off the tee.
But Rory's always been long. So, yeah, what you're saying there is that potentially, going back to the thing, and it was going to be my next question for you, because the chase of people trying to hit it on the up a lot. What you're saying is we potentially should be just looking at what optimizes our golf swing itself. Like, for instance, is telling Rory that he's wrong if he has a couple of bad rounds? Yeah. Probably not. And for me, I know that I've seen stuff around Tiger. Like, Tiger was down when he was smashing it.
Right.
Tiger was down. Yeah. So when I mean down, Tiger was hitting down on the golf ball and hitting the thing 500 back in the day, you know, and people are thinking, he wasn't the best driver of the golf ball either, but people are trying to, you don't have to hit the ball way on the up to be a good driver. Like, look at DJ.
Sure. And then I guess you've still got to look at the TrackMan averages, which, sometimes aren't always up to speed. But I noticed they've been doing a lot more posts about, their averages recently. And if the tour average is still in the negative slightly, I mean, we have to kind of appreciate that the average is still negative, which means that some guys are hitting down -4 on a driver, and guys like Rory hitting up 5, and some others. I remember Tongchai years ago hits up a huge amount on the driver. Yeah. It's like 7 or 6, right? So he's on that end of the spectrum, and other guys are on the negative end of the spectrum. And I think what you said and what I look for all the time, especially with better players, is what are they doing naturally to produce that shot? If I shift it like 1 or 2 points, does it have a big influence? But to take someone, to me, from a -2 driver to a +3 could be disastrous, because if we do it in an unfunctional way, maybe like adding way too much tilt at setup or late in the downswing, that's very hard for them, when that swing direction is shifting a lot compared to what they're used to. Again, it's all about face control at the end of the day. It's very hard for them to control the face.
Yeah.
I mentioned before about that tour player that was swinging like -6 and down 4 and likes to hit this little peel fade. I think he can do that consistently because he knows how to control the face in that swing direction every single time.
Yeah.
And so when you shift that dramatically, it's going to shift the player's feel of where their body is and how they apply the loft and the face control to that.
Yeah, the timing,
direction of the swing.
Yeah, and when you say apply the loft, like straight away, my terminology would be around release pattern, like releasing the club is so foreign. Like think about Rory's release pattern to DJ's release pattern. Like he's understanding
100%.
when they're making contact, to try and shift that is so wildly different. And so I think driver lessons are scary. And what I mean scary is that they're wild, right? And
they are wild.
They can be really wild. So tell me about, so I want to ask you one more question after this one about that driver lessons. But the best practices to shift the angle of attack for someone with their driver who, say, has been measured, and I'm going to say that majority of them want to probably hit more on the up, right? Because they watch YouTube, right? And they want to hit more on the up. Best practices.
So for me, it would be a combination of, it's really understanding the tilt of the upper body, how that is, how we can shift that either in setup.
Yeah.
To some extent. Ball positions, I find a really interesting one. I mean, for you and me, or even like maybe people listening, they would say, just move the ball forward. It's not always the way to move it, because I think, again, we have to understand how the player is going to react to that ball position. For me, often when I move the ball forward, the way that the player accesses the ball is they've got to cover it more to get more on top of it. That can actually, now when you're swinging more left, you're hitting more down, and that's exactly what you told me that you didn't want to do.
Yeah.
We're trying to hit more up. So, often for the slicer that's got the ball forward and they're hitting down and across it, I'm moving the ball further back, not forward. And when I say back, I'm not saying the middle of the stance. So I'm just saying I'm moving it into a position which would be more under the left shoulder, which I would define as the center of the swing. Sometimes I'm even moving it back one. Like you mentioned before, I might even pull the right foot back, which gives them a little bit more play to work the right side a little bit more underneath. I'm definitely looking at the upper hub, moving that back. I'm sometimes even moving the pelvis a touch forward, because if I can get them to have a little bit more lateral motion, often even I'm in my chair here, as I push my hip forward, you can kind of see I'm tilting back. So. And when we see Rory, he has a really strong move where this left side pulls up and back, and that's why he can hit up on the ball. But a lot of it's certainly how the hips are moving. So not to go too deep into the weeds there, but I would definitely say ball more back than forward for the slicer.
Yeah.
Having this upper hub, back, maybe right side pull back a little bit so we can get them a little bit more closed. That's just what I would look at in setup alone.
I think, and you know what, for the people listening, it sounds crazy, but it's completely true, and that's how I would generally, I'm on the same direction there with you, is that people assume that putting the ball further forward is going to help you hit more in the up, but what I see a lot is if you slice the ball and hit down on it, what Stevie was talking about there with the spine tilt being tilted away, the upper hub, say tilting away from the ball, that student will actually tilt their spine in the opposite direction when we see with slicers a lot. Would you agree? Like their spine, they don't maintain their spine tilt.
Correct.
So they actually tilt the other way. So if you put the ball further forward, you can actually tilt your spine more and more in the opposite way and actually get more down on the damn thing and wipe across it. So it blew my mind.
The other thing,
put the ball further back, tilt.
The other thing I see when they do move the ball, let's say they do move the ball forward, the only way they're going to hit it higher is to actually fall back more. Like the way they access the ball would definitely be to go that way. That's why I think they could hit down. But the only way they can get it higher is to swing back further on the ball. If they tee it up high enough, they'll still catch it. But that's actually just caused them to swing more left, increase the spin loft more, and the slice actually becomes more and more severe. So, often as coaches, we're working in, we're going to the opposite end of the spectrum to find the middle ground. And a lot of what we say is very counterintuitive to the student. So moving the ball back to increase the angle of attack, just doesn't make sense. But that's actually what can work.
So, all right, that takes me to my next question. We have lots of people that come to our lesson tee, and I have to explain to them every single time. They say, I hit my 6-iron or my 7-iron pretty straight, but my driver slices, right? And you go, well, I know, because of the way that we see with physics on the club or whatever, the amount of that we see out with a 7-iron doesn't create as much curvature as we do when we see out with club face to path with a driver. You'd agree with that, right? So obviously more, it just spins more. It slices more, I should say.
Sure.
So tell me, when someone comes to you and their golf swing, let's say, use the term, isn't functional, and they say to you, Stevie, I really want to have a driver lesson, but they can't hit their 7-iron within certain parameters. How do you approach that?
It's definitely challenging. I mean, I would say I've probably been a little bit guilty in the past of shying away from driver lessons, but not of sort of recent times, just because I think there's still a lot of things that we can do to help students with the driver if we still feel their swing's not as functional.
Yeah.
And they just have to understand that the pattern is, it's probably going to be better, but it's still going to be, maybe not exactly what they want. It's still going to be a little bit erratic. So from a functionality standpoint, I'm still trying to achieve the same things with that particular student, with what I see with their irons, whether that's, a better quality setup. For example, for the driver, maybe their setup's not allowing them to do that.
Yeah.
And it could even be something like, okay, let's shift the ball position. Let's add some tilt in there. Let's get you to help you move off the ball a little bit better, or I should say to help you, say, maybe turning rates or whatever. But I still have to go into the functionality of the swing to some extent.
Yeah.
So I'll usually do two things. It'll either just be a really simple setup change that will help them because they can just manage maybe the contact a little bit better. Maybe that's along the face, or maybe that's like up and down the face, which is like super important because, or if I feel like the setup's good, I'm just trying to get them to functionally move a little bit better with the driver as well. And again, we have to understand that, as you said, a miss with a 7-iron that might be hit slightly off the heel might only be, 10 yards to the right. And with a driver, it's going to be 35 yards to the right.
Yeah, it is.
And they have to understand that that's just the fact that the driver is a more challenging club when you miss it.
Yeah.
As you said, like the spin axis gets tilted and the ball just curves a lot more than it would with an iron.
And I think that's important, like we have to probably, how many times a day do we say that? Every day we have to explain that to people in regards to it. And that'd be the first thing I hear every day. I go like, thanks for coming, Steve. Why are you here today? I hit my 7-iron all right and hit my driver everywhere. Well, so does everyone.
Also just feel if we can get them with the driver, even though, again, functionality, it mightn't be quite what we want. If we can get them just to understand where the miss is happening off the face.
Yeah.
Gear effect obviously has a big influence. Huge. But, if the slicer has a reasonable pattern and the heel strikes are so severe, if we can somehow find them towards the middle to the toe side, that can really shift a lot of the directional control.
Yeah.
And so, having that foot spray or powder on the face or some feedback of where they're striking off the face for that golfer can be, a pretty good feedback tool. And so often I find a lot of my driver lessons are not so technical because, we're doing enough with their irons. I know the pattern. It might be just more club face awareness and setup and just trying to find the middle of the face more consistently. So, when they hit it with a little bit of an open or closed face, they can still hit it within that, let's say 20 left, 20 right sort of parameter and find the golf ball.
Yeah. Because as well, we're faced with circumstances where, like, our job as golf coaches is I always tell the student I need to work backwards with your game. So we react to score. How are you scoring? How can we fix that? Is it through ball flight?
Sure.
Is it through statistics? Let's have a look at your stats. And then let's take a look at what technique we can improve in those areas to try and get you that way there. Where, I must say that 1,000 times a day because we haven't got all day to work through everything, right? So especially on my online lessons, they just send me a 7-iron. I go, well, let's have a look at your stats. Is this one that's really letting you down the most? Where a lot of the time when I do see a lot of statistical information that comes across, which a lot of people use, I think it's RCOS or ACROS, whatever it's called, I get the screenshots sent to me. And people's drivers are just, even though their 7-iron, let's keep saying their iron play is not functional, but if their driver is just off the planet every tee shot, it doesn't matter if they're the world's best with a 6-iron. They just can't play golf unless they're Tiger. Right? But you need to be able to, we need to at times as coaches is bite the bullet and give them a little bit of a blueprint and understanding of if you do this, this, and this, it's going to be okay for now. It's going to work within this pizza slice window as I use a pizza slice.
Yeah.
But if you keep improving your pattern with your 7-iron and you follow these rules with your driver, it will get better. But the way that your golf swing, you swing it now with your, keep saying 7-iron is with your impact, what you're delivering, it's still going to be wild with the driver at time to time.
Yeah, it's ultimately just getting them to reduce their wasted shots off the tee, less wasted shots. If we can probably get that, obviously depends on their skill level, but, if we can get that less than 3, where they're not having to chip out, reload, having out of bounds, water, whatever, and even to some extent understand where they should be hitting driver, especially if it's their home course all the time. Okay, well, you only need to hit driver 8 times and the other 6 we're going to go with a 3-wood because it just holds too tight.
Yeah.
Even around strategy sometimes can help quite a bit. So, it doesn't always have to be a distance thing.
Yes.
It's often just a control thing when it comes to scoring.
Mate.
Distance is nice. So, and then that could ultimately even just giving a better strategy. I know it's off topic. Can allow for less wasted shots and improve their scoring.
Mate, seriously, I'll get information through, I do a lot online and they deliver this information to me. They're all my nerds that I coach online and I love that. And I can tell you right now, every single time I get a PB every day, right? Well, someone shoots their best score.
You're right.
The first thing I look down that column, there is no penalty shots.
Gotcha.
Every single time. I go, well, look at that. You didn't lose 2 off the tee this time, or 3 shots off the tee. Every time, because they're giving themselves a better opportunity. And we know that when we see statistical information, like I will see something along the lines of, you hit 10 greens, you shoot X, you hit 11 greens, you shoot X. If you give yourself more opportunities to hit more greens, and you don't need to be further down there, just without the penalty, then your score, you hit 2 greens, I think it decreases your score by like 3 to 4 shots, 2 extra greens around. So
there you go.
You can hit them from the fairway. You don't have to be 400 down there.
Yeah, there's no point having your, personal PB greens in regulation, or the other stat that I get my students to keep is I want to know greens in regulation plus within 10. I would say misses within 10 because to me they kind of go hand in hand. So they might hit 7 greens in regulation, but they might have had 5 greens that they miss within, let's say, 10 yards or 15. So those kind of clump together for me. And then you have the others. The others section is super important. Maybe there's 5 others. Now, if those 5 others were all wasted shots off the tee, you can forget those really 12 or 13 holes that you play well. You're still going to shoot, 87 when you're trying to break 80.
Oh, I love that.
or whatever that is. So
I love it.
So it's kind of, it's a tricky balance, but you're trying to, I guess, manage those various parts of the game, or I'd say sections, because let's just say a good 12 handicapper that's trying to break 80 a handful of times a year, or is sort of trending in that direction. Maybe they're hitting 5 to 6, maybe 7 greens in around. And I was having this conversation with one of my students. As soon as you have more than 2 double bogeys around, your 80 scores, it's headed way south. And so some of that can become because of wasted shots off the tee for sure. Some of it's just, fiddling around.
I love that.
With a short game shot or something like that. So, yeah.
I really like that stat there. So for the people listening that, if you're a recreational golfer and, greens and statistic, you say hit 7 greens, whatever. But if you can make the other 11 within 10, then holy moly, you're going to have a good score, right? You're not going to have a really, really bad day. But if you have, you said there potentially say 5 within 10, and then the other 5 or 6 are others because of waste shots of the tee, you're in big shit. I really like that measurement.
Or it's getting him to manage those other 5s. So maybe if it was a missed tee shot where they couldn't reach the green, but they can still manage a bogey, for me, that's a massive win.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're still in the ball game. Yeah. I guess it's managing the others.
Yeah.
Certainly if they're hitting 7 greens and 11 around 10, they should be hopefully sub 75. But but it's definitely managing those others that aren't within 10. How is that happening? Those others.
So your role as a coach essentially is that when you ask that question, if that one's delivering you that information, you would say to them, what happened on those 5? So, I see you hit 7 greens, great. I see you hit 5 close or 6 close.
Yep.
What happened on the 5? And then you say, how did you manage that? What happened? That's where you.
Yeah, that's almost the whole conversation every day when I'm looking at analyzing, because at the end of the day, I know the 6 and 6. I know the 6 greens and I know the 6 close. The 6 greens are going to be even par, 1 over or 1 under.
I love it.
The others, they're going to basically be 3 to 4 over, because they've got a couple of other up and downs and they haven't. So all of a sudden for 12 holes, they're going to be 3 or 4 over. I know that. For that type of golfer. So then I'm just like, okay, what's happened on the 6 others?
Yeah, and they've shot 85 or something, and you're going, what's going on there?
100%.
Oh, I love
and it's
that.
almost always the missed greens and the others are about bogey golf.
Yeah.
About. And often it's a lot worse.
I was going to say, that'd be good, I'd imagine.
Often a lot worse.
That would be, bogey would be, what I would imagine about the better end. Oh, mate, that's incredible. Yeah. That's a fantastic way for me that I'm going to use that too to communicate with my online students, to find out, because we're all about wanting to improve the score, right? That's what we want to do. You don't want to make that 7-9 they've hit sneaky close. You want to improve it out of sight, right?
100%.
Hey, Stevie, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on, mate. You teach me a lot, my friend. Hey, are you coming to Bali or what? What's going on?
Coming to Bali, yeah. Well, tell me about that again. What's happening?
For people listening, Kerrod Gray and I are hosting a coach camp at Bali National Golf Club, and a student camp and a coach camp for coaches. And people interested in the student camp, they can inquire. If they're interested in the coach camp, they can inquire as well. And you're our surprise guest. People listening to this will actually know that. So you're
right.
If you're in agreement with it. So basically, what we're doing is I'm on. In our coach camp is, Kerrod has got the fastest growing YouTube golf instructional channel, and he's he's great at branding. He's great at delivering his information. He's fantastic at that. And without pumping my trumpet, I'm probably one of the busiest online golf coaches in the world, and we are going to educate coaches on how to coach, essentially through online coaching, how to brand themselves, how to do it. And then we've hopefully adopted your services in regards to, for the coaches, not only for your online coaching, prowess, but more or less, we love the idea of your systems that you coach in, coaching systems. I guess you could use that word, and methods and how you explain certain things. So I got you in for a few days for that, which should be good fun. Bali National Golf Club. You been there?
I haven't been. I've been to Bali,
Yes.
but I haven't played golf over there. I've been to Kuta. I think New Kuta a couple of times to do some aim point classes and walked around the course, but I haven't been to Bali National, so that'll be fun.
It's a nice place.
I hear it's an awesome. I hear actually the quality of the golf course is awesome. I was going to say awesome scenery, but I think Kuta's out on the ocean now. I don't know about Bali National.
Yeah, New Kuta's got a cover for that. I actually teach the course designer of Bali National through online coaching.
That's very cool.
Isn't that random?
Wow.
Isn't that random? I actually met him
I love it.
for the first time up at the Australian PGA. He's from Queensland, Mr. Brett Mold.
Oh, just recently?
I just met him for the first time. No, I just met him for the first time, but he's been online for years.
Right. Got you, met him. Yeah, because that's I guess what's sending you over there. I mean, you stayed over there quite a bit, so that's the connection. That's cool.
It's just really bananas. I just said to him, I'm going to Bali National to do some stuff, but it's a great place. It's they've got a great clubhouse, and the trip itself, if you want more information on it, just let me know. But it's a great thing. We're going through a company that's really helped us out. It's really cost effective,
awesome,
all inclusive. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great spot.
It is.
Great tourist destination. Aussies love to go there.
They love it, especially from where they are, from where Kerrod is, right, in Perth.
Yeah.
And if you want more information on that, please don't hesitate to ask. Kerrod and I will be doing a podcast on it as a whole. He'll be presenting something nice and formal, not like me, like I just did then. He'll probably be like, Toby, shut your mouth. But anyways, it is what it is.
Right.
Alrighty, mate, I appreciate you coming on, Steve. Where can people get you? Are you doing any online coaching? Or are you still the world's busiest in-person man? What's going on?
Yeah, no, I probably do about 15, 20% online coaching still.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a few regulars, but it's definitely tapered off a lot because I do more sort of in person now. Yeah. But a lot of people reach out to me just directly through Instagram, which is probably the easiest.
Yes.
And I try and stay fairly current, just with my students' progress and stuff like that out there. But yeah, Skillist, I do use Skillist mostly for online coaching. So yeah, there's still some options there if students want to.
Yeah.
Want to catch up with me there.
You have a lot of people come fly in and see you, right?
Coaches or students?
Students and coaches.
Yeah, a bit of both for sure. Yeah, I have a lot of. I mean, because Southeast Asia is, it's very easy to kind of get around to. So yeah, definitely have a lot of students coming from different parts. Now that things are back opened up again, which is fun. Yeah.
And how do you manage? You must have your Instagram inbox. How do you manage all your messages and comments and stuff?
I mean, probably much like yourself. I'll check it a couple of times a day, and I mean, it's every time I get a message in there, it's kind of humbling still, because people are reaching out to you primarily for coaching and or information or coaches. So I just try and be very thoughtful in my response. I said a lot of inquiries are from because of lessons. They want lessons. I'd say 60% is in person and 40% is online. So yeah, just try and be thoughtful in the response. Say thank you, and
you are thoughtful.
And give them some information on how to see me.
You are very thoughtful, actually. You are very kind with messages. That actually, that's true. That's true. People listening, if you've reached out, get him. SGG Golf Coaching. Hey, tell me, was it SG Golf Coaching?
Or SGGC, I guess.
SGGC.
I mean, SG is my first two initials, and then golf coaching is obviously for golf coach. SGGC.
Yeah, sweet. Hey, mate, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on and talking about some kind of tricky topics there. And I guess I'm sure I'll see you on the group chat, but I'll see you in March. See you in March.
Look forward to that for sure.
I'll put all your links below.
Fun.
Thanks, brother.
Awesome, buddy.
Thanks, mate.